Okay, so it's only been a few months since Brother Stephen, he went over the Olivet Discourse, and I am actually choosing to go over it again. It is 2 chapters in Matthew, and it is a struggle to get through in one sermon. I hope to take a slightly different path of presentation. I look at text from maybe a strange perspective at times. I was raised atheist, and in that I studied existentialism. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Why bother with this life? And so as I struggled through that and eventually came to Christ, those were the questions that hung on my mind. And so when I look through the Bible, I look at it through that lens. And I struggle as I was preparing for this sermon. I was thinking, I want to share that with people. There's many in the church who have been raised in the church and they haven't had those types of questions and those types of struggles. But at the same time, I think many in the church do have those struggles at times. It's kind of a weird thing to study. And I was trying to find, what's the best passage I can think of to introduce the topic? This focus as to why I am here, why go through these things. And so I picked this particular discourse, this particular topic, to try to present that. So we'll move ahead here. This is at a hinge point in Matthew. This is where we're coming to the end of Jesus' ministry. This is just going to be a few days before his crucifixion. So let's put the frame up there. So beginning in Matthew chapter 24, it says, Jesus left the temple and was going away, and when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple, he answered them, "You see all these things, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us when these things will be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age." So this is the beginning of the discourse. He's left the temple, he's gone over to the Mount of Olives, and he's having a talk with his disciples. So this is a conversation between those that are following him and Jesus. We get to the end of the section, and it's framed with the timing. And it says here in Matthew 26, verse 1 and 2, it says, "When Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, 'You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up and crucified.'" So, setting the scene, he finished all these sayings. This is a closing discourse. It's 2 days to the Passover. The Son of Man is going to be delivered up. This is where the Master's journey begins, and the audience of the disciples, and he's trying to prepare them for life while he is away. So the movement of the text, this is going to be very survey-like. The first 2/3 of Matthew 24 is Jerusalem's fall, the turmoil, and the endurance. And then he says towards the end of that passage, you don't know when this is going to happen. But then he pivots and he says, "You also must be ready." So this is where it's going to go from the question that they asked, "Tell us when these things will happen," and all of this, to you need to be ready. Ready for what? Ready for his return. Ready to do whatever he sets for them to go do. So it starts out with one parable. There's actually 4 parables that go on through this series. And the first parable is a relatively easy one. It's Matthew 24, 44 through 47, and going on further to the wicked. So he's talking about the faithful and the wicked servant in this passage. And I'm not going to try to go read everything because, like I said, it's 2 chapters, and I don't want us to be here till midnight. So bottom line is you've already had this material presented. So you've got this time of waiting here. There's this master's absence, and there's a faithful servant who keeps charge of what he's been given. And so he feeds the other servants and takes care and tends to them in the times that he's supposed to and tend to them. Meanwhile, you have a wicked servant, and he goes on and he gets drunk and he starts beating other people. And he just says the master's delayed. I don't have to worry about this stuff. I can do as I please. The judgment that comes when the master returns, right? Well, there really isn't a judgment for the faithful servant, but for the wicked servant, he's cut into pieces and he's cast with the hypocrites. Because, well, in the end, he was a wicked man and he was a hypocrite. We get the judgment of that. It's kind of obvious. That's an easy one. It's easy to gather that one. We get into the next two parables, and the interpretation isn't as obvious. And so the next parable is going to be about the 10 virgins, and they have lamps, and they're sitting here waiting for the bridegroom. And you got 5 foolish ones who don't have any oil; they just have their lamps. And you got 5 wise ones that have oil and their lamps. The bridegroom's delayed. Everybody falls asleep, and there's a midnight cry. With the foolish virgins, their lamps going out. And as the bridegroom comes, they're trying to figure out how to get oil at the last minute and whatever. And he just says, I don't recognize you. I don't see you. I don't know you, right? He just doesn't get that. Who are they, right? So there's some obvious things in here. All 10 wait for the bridegroom. Well, we know that these are the disciples. That's who the virgins are supposed to represent, the bride of Christ. So it's addressed to those connected to the kingdom. All have lamps. All have signs of readiness, right? They have some preparedness. They know what's going to happen. They know the master's going to return. They know they need to have some lamps. But they all fall asleep. The criticism isn't that they all fell asleep. There's oil needed before midnight. That was something that they were supposed to prepare for in the day, right? There's a time when you go buy oil, and it's not at midnight. So it's just a natural consequence. It's not a judgment. And in the end, the oil cannot be shared at midnight. I mean, if it's all dark and you're sitting here trying to pour oil, what's that look like? It goes everywhere, right? So the warning there is that each must acquire and keep before the end. And then because they didn't have oil, they're excluded from the feast. So somehow, some way, this oil is a critical element that decides whether or not 5 of the virgins get to go or don't go, or 5 do, whatever. They all had to have their oil. And that is the criticism. And so we're sitting here stuck trying to ask the question, well, what is that, right? What is the lamp? Well, it's not fully spelled out at that point in the parable. What is the oil? Well, we know it's necessary. We know you can acquire it. You can go trade for it, right? But it's something you can't share at the last minute when the master returns. So why is the judgment harsh, right? The forgetfulness or foolishness or whatever doesn't really explain, the fact that he doesn't know them. And so we're kind of left with some questions as we go through this. And that's okay, because we'll get the answers. You just have to wait for it. Same thing goes into the next parable with the talents. Again, man goes on a journey, goes away, and he comes back. He gives some of his property to his servants. They're stewards. They're not owners of this stuff. They're given 5, 2, 1 talent. It's an unequal charge, each given by ability. Now, one of the challenges we get into is we hear the word talent and we start thinking about, well, I've got skills, abilities, whatever. God's blessed me in certain ways, and we start to apply that common understanding in the English language of what a talent is. But in this case, a talent is a huge sum of money. It would have been, a large volume of silver. It would have been equivalent to a lifetime's wages. Now, of course, instead of lugging around a big thing of silver, you could always get a smaller mass of gold. There was basically an equivalent of somewhere between, a 12 or 10 to 1 ratio at that time. It's not like today. That ratio goes up and down. People make money off of that. As he goes away, The servants are expected to act during the interval with what they've been given. That's their charge. Well, we see the three responses. The guy with 5, he trades, he gets 5 more. It's very active stewardship. You get the guy with the 2, and, well, he trades, and he gets more, and he gets 2 more, and 1 digs and hides it. It's preserved. The capital isn't lost, right? It's there to be returned whenever the master comes. He doesn't squander it. He doesn't use it for his expenses, kind of thing. One of the things to keep in mind in this is that, when we think about trade is something that if you do any kind of investment, you take any kind of risk, not everything works out, right? There's this idea of casting your bread upon the waters, right? Some of it's going to come back to you, right? You're going to take some risks. Some will lose, some will gain. The net effect is there is a gain. It's not to say that every talent earned another one. We don't know how that worked out. That's not told to us, right? But in life, rarely does it work out one for one. So the faithful servants, they get this commendation. They're told, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. 2 of them get identical praise. The faithfulness, it's not based on the raw quantity that they earned. They enter into the joy of their master. They get a reward, this joy of belonging and a shared purpose. They've been faithful over little. I don't think that's little. If I had, 5 times my lifetime's wages, I wouldn't consider that little, but the master does. But then we have the wicked servant. And he says, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. So his speech, it exposes his perception of the master. He says he's a hard man. Now we know that the master is supposed to be either God or Christ. And when we look at that, is the claim there that, well, God is just a harsh judge, right? Is that where he's going with that? Reaping where you did not sow. Again, if we look at this as God, God gets the harvest in the end anyways. Why do I need to labor, right? In a sense, you could sit there and think, well, from an existential perspective, I'm going to die, and I've got a soul. Well, at least if I see God and I don't know about it, well, okay, he'll tell me so, and then we'll have a conversation, and I guess he can have my soul if he wants it. There's that existential perspective of a man without faith could just say, here, God, have it, right? You gave it to me, here it is, it's back. There's a fear. And it's a real fear. The idea that, if the master, if God is a harsh judge, can you serve, can you fulfill your duty without joy? Can that sustain you? And then there's the burial, right? So why bother? Is life worth spending for this master if he's such a harsh guy? Is it worth all my work and all my effort if he's just going to come back and take what's his? So there's questions that remain. There's this concept of investment with the bankers. He's told, you should have at least loaned out what I gave you to the bankers and made some interest. What is the interest in that parable? Talent is transferred. This money is taken from the one with 1 and given to the guy with 10. Somehow, whatever this is fungible. It can be taken from one and given to the other. There's this concept to everyone who has, more shall be given. Is that a link to maybe Matthew chapter 13? That's the passage where it's talking about, the seed, the sower of the seed, and, people, do they Do they understand? Well, okay, you guys, I'm going to tell you these things. More is going to be given to you. Is that where he's going with it? Then there's the concept of the outer darkness. The guy didn't lose the capital. The master gets his talent back. Why does failure to produce interest mean exclusion from the master's joy? Well, we start to get the answers in the last parable. This is the parable of the sheep and the goats. So what happens? The Son of Man in glory comes down, and all the nations are gathered, and the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. The sheep inherit the kingdom, the goats go into eternal fire. The difference is what? The whole point of that parable is the service to others. And it's like, well, the sheep are like, well, when did we serve you? I mean, we never recognized you. And the master has to tell them, right? He tells them it's when you did this to the least of these, whether it was a drink or food or clothing or any of these things, whatever you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Meanwhile, the goats didn't do any of that. That's the judgment. So this parable starts to define and clarify things. What does the master value? Well, it's people, especially the vulnerable, those that have a need. What is the interest? Well, if we go back and we think about, well, obviously Jesus has an interest in people, and we're expected to have an interest in people and then meeting their needs, then the interest would be, do you just have the time and the compassion and the interest to care for those around you? Doesn't mean extraordinary ways. It's just the ways that are available to those nearby. Why does service to others matter? Service to the least of these my brothers is service to Christ, service to Him. The judgments are existential. This is your choices and your perspectives and how you value others, whether you see it's worth investing in them, is what's going to make or break your eternity. It becomes a judgment by which you're separated from God or you're brought closer. What is the inheritance? Well, in this one, the kingdom, the parallel is entering the master's joy. Okay, so we get earlier in Matthew 24, don't abuse others. That's a blatantly wicked servant, right? Don't do that and expect God to be pleased with you and want you in heaven. Keep light burning. The sheep didn't do what they did out of fear. They just did it. It was a natural compulsion to them. It was their joy. It was godly service, and they were motivated to be that way. We think about keeping the light burning. You can go back and think about Matthew chapter 5 over in the Sermon on the Mount. City set on a hill, a light on a lampstand is not hidden, right? Let your light shine so that others may glorify God. So we're also expected to put the master's property into circulation. You're not expected to bury the joy of the opportunity to serve others. You're expected in that light, in letting your light shine and reflecting Christ and His love for people, you're expected to demonstrate that and demonstrate it to a point that others start to question, why are you that way? Why do you see value in others? Others that aren't necessarily your family, just others around you. You're supposed to cherish those the king cherishes. Well, who does the king cherish? He cherishes everybody. If you don't understand that part, then it's very hard to see, well, okay, why should I be serving other people? Well, he cherishes everybody. So the light, it's acts of love, showing people's value, leading them to glorify God. But oil, the godly joy. You can't serve God sincerely for the rest of your life, unless it's a very short life, without joy. Without joy in doing and serving what God wants you to do, how He serves. An empty lamp. The lights run out. The light is spent. If you lose the joy of serving and loving other people, your light will go out. Others will not see Christ in you. Buying too late. The opportunity to show others Christ and joy in this life is when people have needs. There will come a time when people no longer have needs. They will have died. We will have died, and we have no more opportunity to show that. There is a day of judgment, and when the day of judgment comes, what are you going to do then? How are you going to show people that they have value at the day of judgment? All of those opportunities have disappeared by that time that happens. Any one of those events. You die, they die, the judgment. Opportunities end. The talent, the money, it's a lifetime scale of the charge that's been entrusted to you. You have a lifetime from when you put on Christ till your death to go serve others. And you have a joy and an opportunity in that if you seek to look at it that way. There are the lives in reach. You don't have to go far. You just have to look around. Not to say you can't look far, but there are lives around you. We think about, as parents, we have kids, we have spouses, we think about their lives and how they are within our reach. But we also have, coworkers. And there's limits in our ability to say things at work, depending on your workplace. But then there's the people right here in this room. Did you ever think that collectively we are each other's charge? Your service needs encouragement. My service needs encouragement. We need to have joy in that when you see your brothers and sisters in Christ. The trading is the labor that we do, whether it's apart or together. It's how did you choose to spend your life? Did you choose it in pursuit of all the hobbies, which I have a lot? But I can't do that. I shouldn't do that. I should not want to do that. I should want to see the value in you and in others around me. The doubling, well, there's these acts of service I do, and it encourages people and it shows them Christ. Sometimes people get it. Sometimes people see and they say, you're different. Sometimes it motivates them to ask, why do you look at people this way? Sometimes it makes them look to Christ. Sometimes they get it and they say, Christ loves me that much. In a world where everything can be masked and measured, where I can't make any sense about, in that world, why I am. The thing I call me, why is it here? I can't make sense of that. It's the only thing I can't mass and measure, but I know it's present It's with me all the time. I can't turn it off. Something in this world has reached out and said, that has value, and that is Christ Jesus. That is God. And when that moment clicks, the opportunity sets in to make another disciple. And when you've done that, you get to see them at work. You get to see them have joy. You get to see them to have a life that's abundant in that joy. One of the interesting things is when you see others, whether you've directly impacted, taught them, motivated them, or whether it's just you've encouraged, but you see others grow and they make disciples. All of those opportunities for joy, they exist. Some people will see them and some won't. And those who won't will lose that opportunity for that joy. And they will lose the opportunity to give joy to someone else. And in that, it will be an opportunity for someone else who sees it, to seize it, and to take it, and to nurture it. Will you let that joy pass you by? So as I've said, there's the direct service, taking care of others. You should have joy in that. It's not to say it's easy. But the disciple making, building others up, seeing them take on Christ, see them finding value in themselves because God found value in them. And seeing them grow and multiply. Now, this is a stewardship when we talk about the talents. It's not about me investing where I want to invest when I feel like investing. If you go back and you look at Matthew chapter 10, verses 11 through 15, Christ is sending out the apostles, and he's sending them out to go teach to the Israelites. Sometimes it's called the Minor Commission. And he tells them, if you're received, stay with these people. But if they reject you, dust the sand off your feet, right? The dust off your feet, and go on. We could look at that and say, well, that's a spiteful thing. But is it? There's an investment of your time in reaching people. And there are people beyond those that you're immediately present with who may not receive it. You could go forward and go help others. If you spend all of your time focused on someone who does not wish to hear it, you have taken an opportunity from encouraging someone else. It's not to say don't give them some time, but to just sit there and labor on something that will show no gain when you could have helped someone else. We live in a life of limited resources. You have to use your time wisely. It will be no joy to you. You will not get encouragement from it. They won't get encouragement from it. And neither will God find joy in that service. It's just a natural consequence. When we think about this joy, we are fortunate enough to have elders in our congregation. And they have a charge. They look over our souls. And in that, we're warned in Hebrews 13:17, don't make it burdensome. Make it joyful for them. It's not any gain for you or them. Right? And I would say, that kind of goes to the rest of us. When we serve each other and we serve together, do we gain if we make it contentious? No. We don't gain, they don't gain, the elders don't gain. Does Christ gain? Nobody gains. The whole point is, Christ is the head of the church. We need to serve as his stewards in unity. Why the master is worth serving? Well, we just read a little bit before this, and everybody pretty much knows this passage. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. The master's not merely a reaper. He gave the Son for the world. He sees value in us. We see value in ourselves and in others through the price that Christ paid for us. If you choose to bury that joy, it hides the light that you were shown. It hides the light from others. And you yourself are hiding from the light. John 3:19 gives us this warning. It says, and this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. Why Christ suffered. Hebrews 12, 1 through 2, specifically 2. 1 talks about, this cloud of witnesses in Hebrews, almost encouraging us on, like being in a stadium. But then it goes on into verse 2, and it talks about how for the joy set before him, he endured the shame of the cross, and then he goes to the right hand of God. The wicked servant buries even the minimum interest. But Christ endures the cross for the joy set before him. The wicked servant sees fear, resentment, and a grim duty. Christ, he sees charity and a sacrifice fueled by joy. The wicked servant forfeits the master's joy and any joy he himself might have had in laboring. Christ opens the way into the master's joy for everyone. Entering the master's joy. Why did it have to be that way? Well, you have to have a participation in it. You have to receive it in the first place, and then you have to emulate him in love. You get both sides of that coin, right? If I don't receive it, I don't understand how to give it, right? But I'm working and I'm emulating as best I can what I have already seen Christ doing for me. There's a commendation that comes with that. He says, well done, right? He's happy. He's elated. And they are too. And there's a reward of heaven. I want you to think about if you've ever been invited to a party and it just didn't feel right. Or somebody gave you a commendation and it just didn't feel right. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but how awkward will it be if you don't have anything in common with the Master? It will be an awkward party. It will be an awkward feast. The only way that thing feels natural is by participating. That's the life that Christ had. That's the life he wants us. He wants us to have an abundant life, folks. You got to participate to understand it. Christianity is a contact sport. You got to make contact with people to understand it. Somebody has to make contact with you for you to understand it. Now, this explains why we have the Great Commission at the very end of the book, right? We're told. It's not just that we want to. We're also given the privilege. We're told to go make disciples. Should be, from the teaching all the way up to it, a natural inclination. But we're given the gift of that charge in the end. It's not just, I might want to show it. It might naturally come out. We're told and we're expected to. So in conclusion, I want you to take time to examine yourself. I want you to take time and look at how you serve. Do you serve? If you serve, is it out of compulsion or is it out of joy? Is it out of thankfulness for what God has done for you? What Christ has done for you? Can you be intentional this week? Look for an opportunity to serve someone. I'm not saying anything grand. I'm just saying look for the opportunities and take it, right? We can't take every opportunity out there in the world. I can't volunteer everywhere. I have to make a paycheck. But I can do some things, right? Think about, encourage, or maybe even work towards discipling someone if you can during the week. Whether it's your own kids or it's just your brothers and sisters in Christ here. Anywhere in between. Be intentional about working towards that. Seek the unity of the body here. Be a joy to the elders as they serve. Help them to have joy in their service. It's beneficial to you and to them. It's what Christ wants. And when you're weary, okay, look to Jesus. But also, don't fail to assemble. There's many distractions out there, but don't fail. We're commanded to encourage one another. It shouldn't be an onerous commandment. It should be a natural joy. At communion, when you take time to think about all that Christ has done for you, think about all that Christ has given you. This is the most valuable thing he's given you, is this right here. Cherish it. Be thankful for it. Know that your brothers and sisters, as they labor, they're striving on the same path. I hope this has been encouraging. I hope it's given you motivation and purpose for this week. If you've looked at your service and you say, I haven't been serving with intent to be joy and entering in godly joy. You may be serving and there's some hard things that you're serving in and you need encouragement in that too. You may not have seen Christ, but if you've seen him now, if there's anything that we can do at this point to encourage you, I'd ask that you come to the back while we gather together and we